All right, so the first thing I need to do is I need to kind of make sure I have the supplies that I want to work with, right? And so my pencil is sharp. And I'm gonna grab a little bit of a kneaded eraser. That's about all I'm gonna need. Punny, punny.
That's a knee slapper.
All right. When I start working, I'm gonna get the kind of biggest bang for my buck by beginning to lay in the darks first. So I want to make sure again that everything is where I intend them to be, both in terms of location and even in terms of angle or shape. And so I'm gonna start with the dark values first. And since I'm working with darks, I'm gonna be able to use like medium pressure. If I think about her lash line, for right now, it's all this kind of dark thickness that goes across her lid. And I'm not worried about individual lashes just yet.
It looks so dark on the screen.
You can try that. It's still gonna look dark. I mean, unfortunately for us, that's kind of one of the downsides. Maybe the video will be more true. I don't know, we'll find out, right? All right, so I'm looking at her pupil and there's no space above the pupil and the lash line, so I wanna make sure that they touch. And the edge of the pupil I would describe as soft. So I'm just kind of shading in where it exists. There's some dark here, part of a cast shadow from her lashes that I see over the iris and then coming down. Again, all of that. In the corner of her tear duct, we see that kind of connective tissue that holds everything in place. And I've got a nice cast shadow here too. I'm gonna move out to the outside of her waterline where her lash line is. And there's a cast shadow on her waterline, so I'm gonna put that in place. The waterline overlaps the white part of her eye, and so I'm gonna use a sharp little line for that. You know, this is a whole experiment. I'm guessing yes, but if not, the good news I think for me is that I'm gonna get to draw the other eye with a different class. So the demo that I post may or may not be the one that actually happens in your class. Other than this little shine spot here, no part of her eye that I'm working on is actually white, right? This little spot here is. The quote unquote white part of her eye is really, really light. And I'm gonna move out. Here's that crease. That's got a clean line. And then I'm gonna blend out, you guys. You don't want to permanently be immortalized in my video with me telling you not to talk. This is true, right? There's a cast shadow from her lashes that goes all the way across her lid. And I'm gonna erase for myself this grid line right here that moves right through her eye, right? If the value of the grid line is lighter than the area that I'm working, I can just shade right over it and it'll disappear. If the value of the grid line is darker, I have to erase it. Rowan. If I look at the kind of iris of her eyes, you can see that the values radiate out from her pupil, right? Which just means that they extend out like this. And so I'm going to start putting those things in as well. The iris has a soft edge because it doesn't actually overlap the white part of her eye. It just is kind of a color change that occurs there. In fact, in some areas, you can actually see where the line that lets us know where the iris is kind of soft and hazy. I'm using directional lines in this area. So because I want the value to radiate out from the pupil, I am literally shading in that way. Sometimes with areas that are really light, I may put some value down and then just lift it off. So if I'm trying to get really light values, this additive subtractive method can be a good way for working. All right, so I'm going back up to her lashes. And then I'm going to look at her upper lid. And I'm going to start to shade into this brow area as well. When I look at my photograph, because none of the values on my photograph are white, it can be difficult to determine really how light something is. When I look at my paper, everything is white, and so it can be difficult to determine how dark I'm actually going. One thing I can do for myself is to isolate out the values and to compare them really directly. So if I'm trying to determine how dark the area is, say, above, in this brow area below her eyebrow, I can actually isolate out that value and see what it is. Yes. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm comparing a value to a white area and a value to a white area. So by isolating it out and seeing it kind of apples to apples, I can make a determination about, one, how dark do I need to go with that value? And two, have I matched it? And I haven't started that yet. I'm working right over the shape that I drew for her eyebrow. You guys are doing an awful lot of talking. The fold here of the upper lid is clean, so I'm drawing it. with the tip of my pencil. And then looking above that, I can see a tiny cast shadow. So pulling off of that edge, I'm creating the shadow. I'm getting areas to be, you know, maybe half done as I'm then moving around. So nothing that I have is more than that in terms of completion. And with each layer, I'm changing direction to kind of smooth out my shading. And I'm working out now. These little wrinkles on her skin here are just soft lines. As I'm moving out and around the eye, I'm asking myself two questions the whole time. Because we read value in comparison, I need to know, how is it changing? You know, is it changing in a way that's clean because one item is overlapping another? Is the value changing in a way that is soft because it's a shadow of sorts or a highlight? And the other question I'm asking myself is, how much is it changing? What's the difference between the two areas that I'm looking at in terms of value? I read everything in comparison to the area next door to it. And so working from one area to the area right next door or adjacent is the way that we're going to be working. Again, her whole eye I have maybe halfway developed. But I just keep moving around. I'm gonna need to erase this line right here because the value of her skin in that area is lighter than the value of that line. So I'm just gonna take my kneaded eraser and get rid of it. So again, I wanna make sure that I'm happy with where everything is at before I start shading, before I start eliminating lines, either by shading over them or by actually erasing them. If I move and work sideways, I can see the angle of these little lines a little bit better. For you guys, you would just rotate your paper. rid of this grid box line too. Okay. Once I have the skin and the eye kind of done to about this point, I can start to think about what's happening with the eyelashes. The eyelashes are going to be like little check marks, and the direction that they go on depends on what side of the center they exist. So if they are over here, you'll see them go that direction. If they're on this side, they'll go this direction. Over here, they'll go down that way, and on this side, they'll go down this way. Okay? If I look at the top of her lash line, the number of eyelashes that I legitimately see is maybe 8. Mostly what I see when I think about her lashes is the fact that they together make the appearance of this dark shadow that lines her upper lid. They also cast a shadow onto the white part of her eye right there. Okay? Irregularity is going to be what's best. So down here I can see that the lashes dip down below and then come up. So I'm going to make that edge of that dark irregular. In this back corner, let me finish shading here. They're going to come dip down and come out. In order to make the eyelashes, I need to make sure that my pencil is super sharp so that the tip of my pencil is super tiny. The most important thing about them is that they feel soft. Again, I only see a couple of them. And they clump together. And then I can keep working. Yeah, we can do the bottom ones. They come from the outer line here, not the inner line, which is the water line. And you don't see very many of them either. Mostly what you still see is little darks that let us know where the lashes are at. But like little check marks, they pull up and then come down. There's a box somewhere. I'm still shading with those little compressed circles or ovals that we used when we did our studies, and changing directions to smooth things out. Okay, so I'm gonna stop, but I have her eye 60% done maybe, not finished.